please get in the habit of typing out your work, typing out your calculations or the formulas that you're using, because as I was looking over the responses, and I commented for some of you on Schoology, but not everybody, so I'll just make a blanket statement. When you get incorrect answers, if you only have the number there, if you only are typing in your answer, I have no idea what work you did to arrive at that answer. So I can't help at all make the corrections or advise you on steps to take to get to the correct answer, right? If you're typing out the work that you do to arrive at your answers and you get the wrong answer, I'll be able to go back and see exactly where that mistake happened. And I can work with you in terms of correcting that, right? Or reteaching that or helping you make the connections. But if you're just typing in the answer and the answer happens to be wrong, you're just taking a shot that it's either 100% right or 100% wrong. Okay. And if it's wrong, it's 100% wrong. If you type out your work and you get the wrong answer, right, maybe you did all of the work correct up to that, and then you just had a typo in the calculator, or maybe you started with the wrong base number, but the process you used was the same, right? There's a lot of ways that you might get the wrong answer, but you're so close to being on the right track that it's an easy fix. But there's just no way for me to know that if you're not putting in the work behind that. All right. So please get in the habit of typing out those numbers. Okay. So you had the pay and deductions review. I'm going to go over this. Okay. So this is kind of the last worksheet that we're dealing with deductions. Okay. Next, get into how these deductions are actually calculated. The federal income taxes, state income taxes, how we would actually figure that out. Right now, I'm just giving you percentages to use, all right, as estimates. But next week we'll talk about how that's actually calculated. But in terms of just calculating our gross pay and our net pay, this worksheet probably takes it to the most difficult level because there's different states with different state income tax rates, right? There's in one case, you have a different federal income tax rate and so on. Okay, so if you were able to do this, and as we go through this, if your answers match up, okay, you're in great shape. If you haven't done this, if you struggled with this, if you did it but are getting the wrong answers, right, you'll probably want to go back and maybe try again, or just look a little bit deeper in where the mistakes are. All right, so let's get to it. Number one, or scenario one, Chandler Bing works as a transponder for a data analysis firm in New York. His gross pay for this period is $32.10. He elected to contribute $315 to a retirement account through a paycheck deduction on each paycheck. New York has a progressive tax system. Assume the average New York state income tax is 6%. All right, so for this pay period, what was his taxable pay? So he earned $32.10 for this period, right? We don't know if it's a week, a month, 2 weeks, whatever. It doesn't really matter. Okay, it's just for the pay period here in $32.10, and then from that, $315 is deducted pre-tax into a retirement account. So that leaves $28.95 as the amount that's being taxed. Okay, so even though he earned $3,210 during the month, he only has to pay tax on $2,895. So we're going to use that $28.95 times the various tax rates to figure out how much gets taken out for each of these taxes. So 0.062 is always Social Security. That's 179.49. Remember that we need to round. This is actually like 179.486, right? Yada, yada, 29, whatever it is. Okay. But when we're dealing with dollar amounts, we always round to the nearest penny or the second decimal. So all that 489 gets just rounded up to 0.49. All right. Medicare times 0.0145 gets us to 41.98. For federal income tax, again, we're using the assumed 15% unless told otherwise. So that's 434.25. And state income tax, now we're going to use a 6% or 0.06. The previous worksheets, we were using a 0.05 or 5% assumption for Iowa. New York, we're going to use an assumed rate of 6%. And so that gets us to 173.70. All right. And then finally, what's his take-home pay? So he earned $32.10. $315 already came out for retirement. That got us down to $28.95. And now we have to subtract his taxes. Okay, and so if we subtract all four of those taxes, we are left with $2,065.58. Okay. Sometimes I also just so you're aware, sometimes I also write this as subtracting and then I add these up separately. And so all of those taxes equal 829.42 that's coming out. But again, right. So you can either just start with whatever your taxable amount is and just subtract those all, each individually. You can add up those taxes to figure out how much total is being subtracted for taxes and then just do 28.95 minus the 829, right? Whatever makes sense to you. All right, moving on. Scenario 2, Rachel Green gets paid $13 an hour as a waitress at the coffee shop Central Perk in New York. She worked 43 hours this week. 81 is deducted from each paycheck for medical insurance. All right, so she earns $13 an hour and she worked 43 hours. So some of you just did $13 an hour times 43, which if the number of hours worked were 40 or less, that would be fine. All right. But remember, overtime kicks in after 40 hours. And so she, for hours 41, 42, 43, wouldn't be earning $13 an hour. Okay. She'd be earning 1.5 times $13 an hour. Okay. So we need to break this up and do $13 an hour for the first 40 hours plus $13 times 1.5 to get the amount that she gets paid on overtime for those 3 overtime hours. All right. So that comes out to 13 times 40 is 520. 13 times 1.5 times 3 is 58.50. And so that comes out to be 578.50. Okay, 578.50 then is how much she earned during the week. But we need to subtract out her contribution to insurance, which was $81. So that leaves us with $497.50. So that $497.50 is the amount that's going to be taxed. Okay, so for Social Security times 0.062 is $30.85. Medicare 0.0145, that gets us 721. Federal income tax times 0.15 gets us 74.63. And then again, she's working in New York. The previous question just told us that the New York State income tax, we're going to assume is 6%. So we're going to keep this as 0.06, and that would be 29.85. And so to calculate her take-home pay, we're going to do 497.50 minus the taxes. I'll group these together just so you can see how much it is if you did it that way. So those taxes equal how much? 142.54, leaving Rachel with 354.96. All right, scenario 3, Fraser Crane gets paid $125,000 a year in Seattle, Washington. He gets paid semi-monthly. Okay, so he's going to get paid twice a month. 730 is deducted from each paycheck for retirement. 240 is deducted each paycheck for health insurance. Washington has no state income tax. However, at this income level, his effective federal income tax rate is 17.13%. All right, so a lot to unpack here. Okay, he earns $125,000 a year. He gets paid semi-monthly, so 2 times a month. If there's 12 months in a year, that means he'll receive 24 paychecks. So each paycheck, he has a gross earnings of 5208.33. Okay, so that's how much his gross earnings are each paycheck. But he doesn't actually take home that much, or he isn't taxed on that much. Okay, we take that 5208.33 minus his voluntary pre-tax deductions of 730 and 240. So he is subtracting 970. that is the pay and deductions. Hopefully this makes sense. Okay. Hopefully you can look at those numbers and see where they were coming from. You can see how I arrived at those answers or where the basis of that is. If you're following along and you're looking at this and you just still have no idea where any of those numbers came from, okay, please reach out to me. Schedule a time to stop by my room, send me an email, send me a message on Schoology or Teams or whatever, and just say, Mr. Henry, I am struggling. Help me out. Okay. I'm more than happy to walk you through this at a slower pace if need be. All right. But I'm only going to be able to do that if I know where your mistakes are. So you either need to let me know that you're struggling, or on the worksheets that you're submitting, showing me the work so that even if you're not reaching out to me, I could at least look that over and see where the mistakes are. All right. I'm going to turn you loose, get to work, either getting caught up. Maybe you going over this, you realize some of the mistakes on previous worksheets and you want to give those another shot. Okay. Whatever the case is, use this time productively.